What's going on, Lions fans? Welcome to the Pride of Detroit YouTube channel. I'm Miko, one of the lead content creators over here for POD. Once again, joined by Morgan Cannon, one of our lead writers over on the Pride of Detroit website. Morgan, we are, well, at least at the time of this recording, we are 24 hours away from Lions kicking off training camp and really ramping up their preparation for the 2024 season. It almost feels like it took forever for this time to get here. But I think you and I both know, like, once things kick off tomorrow, things are going to start moving very quickly for this Lions roster.
Oh, breakneck speed, man, and I can't wait. Training camp's fun. Like, football's back. I'm gonna go to the practice on Sunday. That's open to season ticket holders. So excited about that. We'll do a little recap of that, some of the things I saw and what I'm able to share and all that good stuff. And yeah, it's back, man. It's gonna take a while. Training camp's still we gotta get through all of August and early September, but
Yep.
you start to get that taste.
No, man.
Can't
And that's
wait.
what I said. Like, I'm excited. I'm a little bummed out that I can't go to training camp this year. I got lucky last year. Shout out to the person that hooked me up with a ticket to be able to go see training camp last year. It was the first time I'd ever been to training camp. But bro, like, this team keeps winning, and the Lions are going to have to find a bigger place to do their training camp practices because these tickets are just selling out way too quick.
Like, I've gone to the last 6 or 7 years in a row. I go a couple times, but I always go that first day back because they usually reserve it just to season ticket holders. And I messed that up so bad. Like, I got to the front, and then it was me, Sweata, and a bunch of people, like my boy Wilson and them. And it was a pain, and we just didn't. I have a few, so I think me and you talked about it. I could take you to that one on the 12th, maybe, if you're still in town. But yeah,
Bro, I'll make sure
exciting.
I'm in town for that one. I will absolutely make sure I'm back in town for that one because
That's the night one too.
Yeah, and it's such, like, if you're watching this and you've never been to a training camp practice, obviously, like I said, tickets are sold out this year, so it's going to be really tough unless someone, is gifting you one or someone's willing to sell you one, which I don't even think they're transferable
No,
in that
as
way.
far as I know.
Yeah, as far as I know, I can't even remember how I got one, to be completely honest. Like I said, I know someone gifted it to me, but it is, if you're a fan and you've never been to training camp, it's a dope experience. Like I said, I got to go last year. Ryan was there. We went, we got there separately, but we ended up like hanging out while we were there, just watching practice. And it's dope. Like, just being able to see like the flow of practice, to see how, how they start things off, the different, phases that they kind of go through when it comes down to working on different drills and things like that. You really just get a perspective of what it takes to ramp up for a season.
Yeah, I would fully recommend it. Like, if you've never been, and you're a Lions fan or a football fan of any kind, because it is cool. Like, everything's so structured because under the CBA, they can only be out there for a certain allotment of time, and now it's very specific. The ramp up period, which is what they refer to as, like, you're out there for incremental. It's incrementally increased. So their goal is to limit injuries, like those dreaded non-contact injuries, on those kinds of things. You don't want that happening. So they build it up slowly, but even by the 4th day, there'll be some work in. It won't be long. It won't be a very long practice. I want to say it's probably only an hour and a half, 2 hours, total. But yeah, it's fun. It's just the Lions set it up well. They've made big improvements to Allen Park. So shout out the Lions, because, man, back in the day, you just be sitting there, and by the time it was 10, some days it was hot. It's up to 85, 90 degrees, and you're sitting on those metal bleachers. So yeah, it's shaded. When I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh, man, that's huge, because it gets hot over there.
I was going to say, that just shows how much they're willing to invest in their fans, and how much clearly they know, like, that these fans mean to them, that they want to at least be able to provide that level of comfort. But Morgan, with all that said, let's kind of jump into what the meat and potatoes of this video are going to be. We're actually going to talk about 5 things to kind of watch for as training camp kicks off. I know there's going to be so many different storylines. Jeremy and Eric are going to be doing like their training camp, which you can actually get access to if you're signed up for Pride of Detroit Direct. I'll try to make sure that there's a description, or there's a link in the description for those who have not subscribed. But they'll be doing their breakdowns for that. I'll be doing a couple of like training camp observations as well, similar to what we did last offseason. But leading into training camp, there's always certain things that we just kind of want to prepare the fans for, just to kind of keep an eye on, because there's so many different things that are going to be happening. So Morgan, I'm going to kick it off to you first. What is one thing that you're actually like really ramped up for to kind of see as training camp kind of kicks off?
Yeah, for sure, man. So when I did this, when you first told me the idea for this video, I was trying to think of it as like, if you are, like we just talked about, like if you haven't been to training camp, try and go. I know it's going to be tough this year, but maybe in the future. But something to either read, like you're looking for observations from like beat writers, like from our guys, Eric and Jeremy, who are going to be there every day, to everyone else. So I looked at it that way, like 5 things, like, you want to keep an eye on. So the
Mm-hmm.
first thing I'm going to go with, and a lot of fans will be, the ears will perk up, who's going to be that wide receiver 3 along with Saint and Jameson Williams? Because there's, I think it'll be, to be clear, I don't think it's going to be one player 100% of the time. I think it's going to be like a mixture, like a wide receiver 3 by committee, if you will. But yeah, is it going to be Antoine Green? That's who I would really like if Antoine Green stepped up and became like a certified like player, because Brad Holmes strikes magic for like the 100th time already. But yeah, what do you think, man? Like, I feel like that's going to be a big one.
Yeah, I think that's one that I definitely have circled on my bingo card as far as things that I'm going to be plugged into as the training camp practices go on. Is just, okay, who's getting, the most consistent reps with the first team at the wide receiver 3 position, as well as like second team reps too, because just because you start with the second team doesn't mean that you can't move up to the first team. And we know that this Lions coaching staff likes to mix and match some of their personnel a little bit as practices go along. So Antoine Green is someone that I'm absolutely going to keep an eye on. I do think Khalif Raymond may kind of have the edge as of right now going into camp as that wide receiver 3 spot, but Antoine Green, DPJ, and some of these other UDFAs are definitely going to have their opportunity to showcase what they have, because, like you mentioned, those first 2 wide receiver spots between JMO and Saint, those are pretty much locked down as of right now. I know for me, another thing that I'm really going to be focused in on, also on the offensive side, is the tight end 3 and RB3 competition as well. Tight end 3 is something that I don't think gets a lot of attention, Morgan, especially when you have the likes of a Sam Laporta, right? Like, everybody's going to be focused on Laporta going into camp and just how he's growing and developing as a player. But Brock Wright is going to be healthy this year, and that kind of keeps your tight end 2 down. But what the Lions do with tight end 3 with the mixture of James Mitchell, Shane Zylstra is back healthy this year, that's going to be a very interesting battle as well, because like you mentioned, Brad Holmes did draft James Mitchell, and he kind of hasn't quite broken out. He's shown glimpses here and there, but can he kind of start to make waves and become another option at the tight end position?
Yeah, someone's going to need to step up, because the Lions run a lot of 2 and 3 tight end sets in Ben Johnson's offense. Like, he utilizes a lot of those heavier looks to try to get teams into heavier personnel so he can get the matchups he wants, right? With Jahmyr Gibbs against a linebacker, or Sam Laporta against a box safety, things you don't want as a defense. So it sounds a little bit like it doesn't matter, that tight end 3 position, when you're just thinking of it like from a Madden standpoint, like a depth chart standpoint, but it does matter. And if someone goes down, hopefully that doesn't happen. So yeah, if someone goes down and they have an issue, with like someone missing time, having James Mitchell or Shane Zylstra or Hesse, right?
Yeah.
Like one of them like stepping up in camp and certifying and like making their name known on the roster, that would be really big. And the same thing goes for the running back 3. And Monty are obviously locked in, best running back duo in football. But Craig Reynolds is still around. We love Craig, like Craig Reynolds and Khalif Raymond. Like, I love those players. They're going to make the roster. However, they're some of the snaps that they've been accustomed to could be up for grabs.
Yeah, I was going to say, when you start talking about the RB3 position, you start talking about Craig Reynolds, you start talking about Sione Vaki, who the Lions drafted this year as well. And you and I have talked about this a couple times so far throughout the offseason, about just like Vaki might be able to overcome Craig Reynolds by the end of this training camp, just because of how versatile he is. Craig may be the more experienced player at the running back position, but Sione Vaki, even as a rookie, is already coming in with a little more positional versatility than what Reynolds kind of provides the Lions at this current moment.
Yeah, Craig, from a stylistic standpoint, like, he is a one-cut runner, right? Like, he's going to put his foot in the ground. He's going to get north-south. He'll run through some arm tackles. But I wouldn't say he's like the most like, creative or evasive runner in space. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas Vaki, I mean, that guy was on a small sample size, small sample size, but he was
Mm-hmm.
a broken tackle machine, man. Like, so you got to think about like what he provides, like in the passing game, and really, it's going to boil down to like how quickly can he really become a running back, right? Because he doesn't have a ton of reps there. So how long does it take him to pick up on things like, reading like the blocks the right way and pass protection? And, there's a lot of nuance to playing running back. And then tight end, we know I like James Mitchell's game, man. I think he can be a plus blocker in the
Yeah.
NFL and a solid receiver. Like he had that one snag, I want to say maybe it was against the Cowboys where he like plucked it out of the air. So I would like him to assert, like if I'm picking, I'd like
Yeah.
James Mitchell like to assert like his spot. Like I would really like that. But what about you? Do you have a favorite in that room, like for tight end
I,
3?
I think it's the same. No, it's definitely the same as you because it is with James Mitchell. It comes down to he's shown enough things where he is the closest replacement that I think the Lions could have if something terrible were to happen to Sam Laporta, right? If Sam were to miss a couple games or something like that, I think James Mitchell, from a stylistic perspective, has the game that would closely resemble that of Sam Laporta. His ability to get open, his ability to have some, run after the catch ability. I think we all love Brock, right? And I think again he's very similar to that of Khalif Raymond and Craig Reynolds, where it's like, hey, what he does very well. He just probably doesn't do it at a higher enough level to really supplement this offense in the event that one of the key pieces were to go down.
Yeah, Brock Wright's a good, like he'll probably play in the league for quite a while longer. There's a reason that both the Lions and the Niners, the two best teams in the NFC last season,
Yeah.
were willing to pay him. So that has to say something, right? Both Ben Johnson and Kyle Shanahan and Dan Campbell were all like, yeah, well, we want this guy. But yeah, I do agree with you. James Mitchell has the most, like he's a true tight end. Like James Mitchell's kind of like, I trust that guy. Like a lot of the times last year when James Mitchell did get snaps before he got hurt, he was getting snaps in like heavy personnel. He'd come in when they were down around the goal line,
Mm-hmm.
with the bruising, like, the extra tackle and like, the jumbo personnel. So I like that. So I want him to, it's kind of, he's got to do it, right? Like, cause there's competition behind him. So he does need to play well. And then, running back 3, I think it'll be interesting to see how many running backs they keep. Like, is it going to be 4 or maybe even 5, depending on a
Yeah.
couple things,
Because they actually don't have a fullback this year, so like the possibility of
Right.
keeping a fourth running back, like we've been talking about, like could it be Vaki or Reynolds? There's a strong possibility, Morgan, where it could be both. They decide to keep both of these running backs.
I feel good about that room moving forward. Like, even if someone inevitably gets dinged up and Jameer or David misses a couple games, but shoot, you could do pretty good with that. And then you got the best offensive line in football. So I love that we have no questions about our offensive line. Like
I
nothing,
love that
nothing
too.
even discussed. I love it.
Unfortunately, we are going to have some questions before we get to the defense because I think we have a couple questions of the defense. Let's talk special teams first because I just want to get special teams out the way because we know that's always seems to be a question for the Lions going into training camp. We're going into another kicker battle, Morgan, but I think this has the potential to be one of the more interesting ones when you talk about Michael Badgley and you talk about Jake Bates, the former kicker for the Michigan Panthers. There's a lot to really kind of be like tuned into because Michael Badgley has been consistent, right? Maybe not the best kicker, but a very consistent kicker. And from a Lions perspective, what you're going to get out of him. It's funny how many players on this roster we have like that, the Khalif Raymonds, the Craig Reynolds, the Brock Wrights. Michael Badgley fits into that bucket as well as a guy that you know what he's capable of. And every once in a while he'll surprise you, right? Every once in a while he'll hit that 53 yarder that you need in the playoffs to really kind of push your team ahead. Jake Bates comes into this roster and he has the opportunity to maybe take that kicking position to another level with how big that leg is of his based off what we were able to see from him with the Michigan Panthers.
Yeah. And I hate talking about special teams, at least this part of it. So but it's still, it's something people are going to watch and people are going to talk about inevitably. So I really think Bates will have to have a crazy camp, man, in order to unseat Badgley, just because, like you said, we know what we got with Badgley. You can trust him up to a certain distance. He hit that kick against the Rams game when I honestly was about to use the bathroom in the stands. I was not having a good time. I was like,
Yeah,
no way. And so I'll always commend him for that. But I do think Bates is going to be the fan favorite because he hit that long one for the Panthers. Was like 64 yards, but I think
yeah,
he finished the season like 5 of 11. Man, it wasn't great, and I think Dan Campbell knows he's not really going to be like, I don't, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think the Lions are ever going to be one of these teams that settles for long field goals. Like, I think they're always going to trust their offense because it's football, and I think that's kind of where the game is moving. Unless you have a really awesome kicker like Justin Tucker, and even I feel like he's over the hill a little bit there. So
yeah.
yeah, what do you think? I really do think it's going to have to be Bates is going to have to go crazy.
So I'll agree with you in the sense that I don't know if he has to go crazy. I think he just has to be consistent. Right. So if he
Right.
gets his opportunities to kick from 40, or if it's 30, or even from the 20s, you have to make those just as well as make the long ones, because this is the other thing I agree with you with as well. I don't think there's going to be a lot of those opportunities. I don't think you're going to see a lot of situations where the Lions are in the second quarter of a game and they have the opportunity for a 58 yarder when it's like 4th and 5. Dan Campbell's probably going to put the offense out there, right?
Yep.
Versus taking that 58-yard field goal. But I do think what Jake Bates provides you from an athletic standpoint, from a potential standpoint, is worth keeping an eye on. And I think that's what makes it very interesting, because if he is consistent from the 20s and the 30s and the 40s and whatnot, and it's, in situational drills and practice, and then he gets out there in the preseason and you give him a couple of these longer kicking opportunities and he starts banking those,
There we
it
go.
does provide another element to this team. Because I think another thing that we have to keep in mind is that, listen, I'm all for Dan Campbell going for it on these 4th down situations, right? These 4th and 5s, these 4th and 4s, whatever the case may be. But what about 4th and 8? And it's like, it's 4th and 8 for a 56-yard field goal versus like going for it. And it's like, man, you just want to kind of keep the momentum going, just continuing to put points on the board if you're the Lions. This is where I think having a player of Bates' caliber, if he's able to win the competition, this is where I think it really benefits itself. Because instead of just having the option of going for it or punting, you really will start to have the opportunity between like going for it or kicking this long field goal. You really start to take punting off the board in certain situations.
Yeah, and I love that point, and I like that's what I mean when I say go crazy. Like, you got to be crazy consistent, man. Like, from 35 to 45, like, they're gonna look to you to be like, you need to be money most of the time, because like those should be like, you want to end those drives with points. Like, if it's 4th and 7 from the 30, like, you want to be able to bang those 3 points like 8 or 9 times out of 10, and that's kind of, I'm assuming that's how this coaching staff looks at it, just based on what we've seen for 3 years, like,
Yeah.
more often than not, though, they're going to like, no, we're going to keep on going and let's see if we can get 6 here because our offense is awesome. So
Yep.
yeah, I think that's where we're at. I think how you laid that out, like, if Bates were going to do it, I think that's perfect, because he's got to be consistent from the money area where, NFL kickers are expected to make it the majority of the time. And then
Mm-hmm.
if you can hit some of those 55 plus yarders in those situations like you described, that's just gravy, right?
Yeah, 100%. Like I said, I think it just adds another element of danger. Like I said, to this team, you already know that the offense is going to be dangerous. You start adding in the element of the special teams being dangerous, and the next area that we're about to talk about here in a second. If this defense can really start to be that type of, again, reclaiming that top 5 status as a run defense, but also see some improvements in the secondary, you start talking about a really strong team that can strongly compete for the Super Bowl this year. And so, Morgan, I'm going to ask you this: when you going into training camp, how important is like how this secondary looks to you when you're like going to be, kind of staying tuned into training camp throughout the off season?
I think it's probably going to be maybe the most discussed aspect of training camp, right? Like, everyone's going to be talking about, how does Terrion Arnold look, opposite of Carlton Davis? Because I'm assuming, they're going to let Terrion get first team reps from the jump. But I could be wrong. Typically this coaching staff does favor veterans, like even from the jump. But in certain instances, like Sewell, Hutch, they were in there from day one. So I think that's kind of what I expect, but all eyes are going to be on Terrion. We have talked ad nauseum about Brian Branch and where he's going to play this summer, because Dan Campbell's talked about, like, hey, we got to move him around to safety too, because they can't take him off the field. I think all of this discussion is based off of the fact that they don't want to take Brian Branch off of the football field, which I love. This is why this coaching staff is awesome, man. Like, they don't just say, okay, he's one of the best nickels in football. Awesome. He's going to play 60 to 70% of the game. No, we want him to be on the field every single snap. Okay. Which I love. So I want to see what that looks like. Who's going to play the nickel when Brian Branch slides up to safety? Who's going to take a seat for the moment? Is it going to be Kirby or is it going to be Iffy? There's just so many questions to be answered. And if it does work out like this, how many snaps are left over for a guy like Ifeatu Melifonwu? How much is Amik Robertson going to play at the nickel? Ennis Rakestraw, like, you know what I mean? Like, we could talk about the secondary for a whole segment.
I was going to say, like, it's probably the thing that I'm most excited to see, because it's literally just like how you laid out. There are so many different chess pieces to move around in this secondary now where, it feels like Carlton Davis is a staple for it to be your quote unquote CB1. We'll have to wait and see. Does Terrion get his opportunity from jump to be CB2, or is he going to have to show that he has a little bit of work to do to kind of take it from Amik Robertson, who, from everything that we heard in the early parts of OTAs, was really standing out both at the nickel position and at the outside corner position. So, could there still be a hill to overcome there for Terrion Arnold? But if not, cool. You have Carlton Davis, you have Terrion Arnold. And then, you get to that nickel spot and things get really interesting because Amik's there. You have Brian Branch, Ennis Rakestraw Jr. There are three capable bodies to play the nickel spot. Then you move to safety, and Iffy and Brian Branch both are viable options at the safety spot. And so throughout camp, whether it's, again, first team, second team, third team, it's going to be really interesting to see how things kind of get shuffled around. What do things look like on different downs and distances? Again, how do they like to pair up some of these players? The only thing that's going to be unfortunate about this, Morgan, is that we are going to have to wait a while in the terms of Brian Branch to see how the secondary looks, just because he is going to be starting training camp off on the PUP list.
Yeah, recovering from that. I think they described it as like a cleanup surgery, like a cleanup procedure on one of his feet. So I'm sure he was in Terrion Arnold's like YouTube video he dropped. Terrion's, and he looked good. Like he's looking big, looked like he could gain some weight. So yeah, I think it's just all going to be, like we talked about, it's just going to be a way for them to figure out to keep Brian Branch on the field at all times. I'm so high on Kirby. I know you like Kirby too, and I really like Iffy. So there's just so much there's a lot of talent, man. Like, there's Rakestraw I think is a pro-ready player. Like, on most teams, he'd probably start at nickel right away, because he's that kind of, like, he's physical around the line of scrimmage. He's sticky, like, in coverage. He's very intelligent back there, like, communicates well, everything you want. The only reason he slid a little bit is because of his some of his combine stuff. But
slow 40 time and stuff like that. But
all the same things, right? So like you've talked about, there's a wealth of talent back there, and you have options. And I do think, like, this is going to be a matchup based defense. I know that sounds like basketball-ish to you, or to people watching this, but I really do think that's going to be how they're going to go week to week. Like, how do we match up with this team? Who's best to cover this slot receiver or this big bodied X? There's so many options.
Yeah, and I think that's what's going to make both training camp and the preseason both very interesting when it comes down to the secondary, because I don't think you'll see a lot of Carlton Davis, right, once preseason games start rolling around. So maybe you do start to see more of Ennis Rakestraw, getting the opportunity to play outside corner or even getting opportunities to play nickel, because of just how they're going to be trying to get some of these younger guys some experience. But at the end of the day, it's a greater wealth of depth in the secondary position. And like you said, it becomes much more of a multiple defense in the sense that you probably can go into more games this upcoming season and match up with people based off of what you know your players are capable of doing and what they can actually handle in terms of coverage and run defense as well.
Yeah, and you have options. I think that's such a big thing because I think too many. I think new coaches are coming around to the idea of, you know, coaching this way and like thinking of football this way, where it's more matchup based, and we're not just going to run this one scheme and run it well and that's it. That's what we're going to do. It's the end all be all. I think we're moving away from that era of football, which I like because this is way more fun to watch and to break down and to analyze. So yeah, I agree with you. And then the next guy we're going to talk about in our last point here, let's talk about it. DJ Reader, whenever he comes back, man.
Yeah, when DJ Reader comes back, again, a player that we've talked about a lot this offseason ever since the Lions signed him, that's going to be like must see TV or must just see. Like every article that's going to have DJ Reader's name in it is going to be worth reading. But in the meantime, Morgan, it's also going to be important to just hear and see like who are the Lions choosing to deploy next to Aline, right? Like Levi's coming into this offseason probably the healthiest he's been since his rookie year. Does he get some more opportunities to play next to Aleem? There is no Benito Jones. There is no Isaiah Buggs. So, what does that mean for Levi? What does that mean for Broderick Martin? Do we see more of him, with the first team? Or do we see the Lions, again, try to go a little bit quicker on the inside, possibly with the likes of John Kaminsky or Josh Pascal, up until the point that DJ Reader is back healthy and able to get those snaps next to Aleem? That's something else to really stay tuned and keep an eye on as training camp kind of develops.
Yeah, and it's going to be important because the reason I brought up Reader's a very rare player in that he can two gap, he can do everything you want of a nose tackle, and so he just gives you even more options, like giving Aaron Glenn even more options. But with the personnel that you just mentioned, he still has a ton of options, and like we're talking about the interior. If I'm Levi or Makai Wingo, or any of these guys like Kaminsky. Kaminsky's already on that deal. Like he's earned his money a bit, but yeah, I'm a little bit. I'm not happy that DJ Reader's recovering from injury because he's a really good player. And he's going to help the team, but man, it's leaving the door open a little bit to make some noise, right? Like they're going to get a lot more. Like Broderick Martin, like it's still only year 2. Like when they drafted him, similar to Giovanni Manu. Yeah, they knew he was going to be a project, right? Like but the intangibles are there. Like you just got to, teach him the right way to do things. So under Terrell Williams, is it Terrell
Williams, I think.
Terrell Williams. I was going Terrell Owens at the point there. Terrell Williams, like everyone talks about how he's the best defensive line coach in the game. I hope Broderick Martin is a product of that because that would be awesome to have. Like if Broderick Martin is playing like a pro, and you have DJ Reader healthy with Aleem,
I'm right there with you. I was gonna say, like if the Lions are able to get to a point where players like Broderick Martin and Levi Onwuzurike are able to be active, like just being active more this season compared to they were last year. I think Levi missed like 5 games last year, and not all of them were due to injury. Like some of them were just he was not active for those games. Yeah. But yet, like I did the video on this channel where, again, looking at the roster preview for Levi was like their second best interior pass rusher at the defensive tackle position. So it's like you get him with a guy like Terrell Williams, you start to get that game to develop and starting to, again, him staying healthy and him being able to play next to both Aleem and DJ Reader while they're both healthy. That could do just immensely great things for this defensive line, who, again, just like the secondary, you start realizing like, hey, maybe there's some depth here between having a guy like Levi, having a guy like Kaminsky, having a guy like Pascal, and who knows what Makai Wingo ends up being, but maybe he can be one of these diamond in the rough type players that just finds his way into the rotation and being able to make a couple stops here and there as well.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up Levi. Al Carson, one of our new writers at Pride of Detroit, had a nice film breakdown of Levi, and yeah, that'd be awesome. I'm really rooting for him, especially after he wrote that article himself. Levi Onwuzurike did. I thought that if you haven't read that, definitely read that. Definitely worth your time. So I'm for sure rooting for Levi. I hope he can, because man, I think I've said it so many times on the channel, but there's a reason Brad Holmes was ready to trade up for this man. Like his tape at Washington was pretty crazy.
It's
Like
nasty.
like he was disruptive. He was shooting gaps, blowing things up in the backfield, abusing guards and centers. Like when he talked in that press conference about him wanting to F things up, like there was a reason he was so confident in his abilities. So I really hope he's healthy, because that would add a whole nother level to this defense if you do get Reader back and Broderick Martin's ready to play. The personnel's there, and I keep seeing these publications really rate the Lions front seven very highly. Like
Yeah.
PFF, someone else, Warren Sharp did his the other day. And I think the Lions were top 5. We're being, we try to stay objective on this channel. We're obviously Lions fans, but
yeah.
I hope
It makes it
man,
easier
I
when
hope
other people are saying it too, right? Like it does. It makes it easier to make those types of statements, and it's part of what this team has earned, right? As far as what they've been able to put out on the field the last couple seasons, like they've earned this level of belief and this level of trust that, you know what, between the players and this coaching staff, they're going to trend in the right direction. And obviously it's football, anything can happen, but you're never going to have to question effort. You're never going to have to question, like, did they get lucky? Like nothing that happened last year was luck, right? This team went out there and they were prepared and they were just better every Sunday that they won. So like I said, I'm getting myself excited for training camp. I can't wait until we start getting our first level of like first little insights into what happened at practice. Obviously hoping everyone stays as healthy as they possibly can. And yeah, man, this is going to be exciting. With all that said, let us hear from you guys in the comment section below. Would really love to know whether it's something that we said, maybe it's something that we didn't get to mention at all that you're really excited for, because again, there's so many storylines that are going to come out of training camp. Would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. Again, if you are looking for any more Lions content, you can always head over to prideofdetroit.com. We are going to have new articles going up every single day. There will be training camp observation articles. But if you want to hear the training camp observation podcast that Eric and Jeremy are going to be doing, like I mentioned at the top of this video, all you're going to have to do is be able to subscribe to Pride of Detroit Direct. There is a promo code. I believe the promo code is podcast25. Save you a little bit of money on the subscription. So I will have that information in the description of this video. But if you're, like I said, it's another piece of content. It's a little more insight from two guys that are going to be there at every single practice, and they're going to have eyes on all of these things. If you want that level of insight, definitely subscribe to that. It'll definitely be worth it. You don't just get that either. Like from what I know about Pride of Detroit Direct, you get a lot of unique content, a lot of unique pieces from some people that you probably don't get to hear from all the time on Pride of Detroit. It's definitely worth the investment. So with all that said, I'm Miko. He's Morgan. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.